Princess Yuna stood alone on the observation deck of the royal palace, watching the three moons rise over the violet oceans of her homeworld. She was 23 years old, and she had spent most of those years learning one simple truth. She was not wanted here. The Valoran people were tall, graceful, and powerful. Their skin glowed with beautiful violet light that pulsed with their emotions. Their minds could reach across runes, across cities, across entire planets. They could read thoughts. They could push their will into weaker minds and make others obey. This was what made them rulers of 17 star systems. This was what made them superior to all other species they had encountered. But Yuna was different. Her glow was so faint that sometimes it seemed like she had no light at all. Her telepathic abilities were so weak that she could only sense emotions when she physically touched someone. Even then, the feelings came to her like whispers instead of shouts. By Valoran standards, she was broken. She was defective. She was a mistake. Her mother, Queen Hana, ruled the Valoran Empire with an iron will and a mind so powerful she could command entire armies without speaking a single word. She had 4 daughters. The eldest 3 were everything a Valoran princess should be. They were beautiful. They were powerful. They made their mother proud. Then there was Yu, and Queen Hana rarely spoke to her youngest daughter. When she did, her words were cold and short. Yuna had learned to stay out of her mother's way. She had learned to be invisible. It was not hard. Nobody wanted to look at her anyway. On this night, Yuna was not hiding. She had been summoned. The doors behind her opened, and she felt the familiar pressure of her mother's mind approaching. Even from across the room, Queen Hana's telepathic presence felt like a weight pressing down on Yuna's skull. "You sent for me." "Mother," Yuna said without turning around. "I have news." Queen Hana's voice was flat and businesslike. "A new species has been discovered on the far edge of the galaxy. They call themselves humans." Yuna had heard of them. Everyone had. The humans were a young species, confined to a single solar system. They had no telepathic abilities at all. They lived short lives, barely 100 years. They were considered primitive by Valoran standards, but they had shown surprising skill in warfare. The Empire had decided they would make useful allies against the Kathrani horde, a violent species that had been pushing against the Empire's borders for centuries. "The humans have requested a diplomatic marriage," Queen Hana continued. "They want one of my daughters to marry one of their men. It will seal our alliance." Yuna finally turned to face her mother. Queen Hana was beautiful in the cold way that statues are beautiful. Her violet glow was bright and steady. Her eyes held no warmth. "You want to send me," Yuna said. "It was not a question. You are suited for such a minor species." Queen Hana did not even try to soften the insult. "Your sisters have important duties here. You do not." Yuna felt the words hit her like stones, but she did not let her face change. She had years of practice hiding her pain. "When do I leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow." Yuna nodded slowly. She had always known this day would come. Her mother had been looking for a way to get rid of her for years. This was perfect. She could send away her embarrassing daughter and gain a military alliance at the same time. "The humans are primitive," Queen Hana added. "Their planet is small. Their technology is inferior. But they breed quickly, and they fight without fear. They will be useful as soldiers against the Kathrani. Your job is to keep them loyal to the Empire. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mother." "Good." Queen Hana turned to leave, then paused. "Do not embarrass me. Yuna, you have already brought enough shame to this family with your limitations. At least make yourself useful in this one small way." Then she was gone, and Yuna was alone again. She stood at the window for a long time, watching the moons trace their paths across the sky. She thought about her home, the only world she had ever known. She thought about her sisters, who had never shown her kindness. She thought about her mother, who had never shown her love. She realized, with a strange sense of calm, that she would not miss any of it. The next morning, Yuna boarded a transport ship with a small collection of her belongings. Her sisters did not come to say goodbye. Her mother sent a servant with a formal message wishing her success in her new role. That was all done as the ship rose into the sky. Yuna watched her homeworld grow smaller and smaller. The violet oceans, the crystal cities, the palace where she had never belonged. She did not cry. The journey to Earth took 3 weeks. Yuna spent most of that time studying the humans. She read their history, which was full of war and struggle, and somehow also full of art and music and love. She learned their languages. She studied their customs. They were strange creatures. They could not read minds, so they had developed complex systems of words and expressions to communicate. They could not sense emotions, so they had learned to ask each other how they felt. They were weak compared to Valorans, but they had spread across their small planet and built great civilizations anyway. The more Yuna learned, the more curious she became. When the ship finally entered Earth's solar system, Yuna looked out at the small blue planet floating in the darkness of space. It was tiny compared to her homeworld. It had only one moon. Its people lived such short lives, but as she watched the sunlight dance on Earth's oceans, Yuna felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt hope. The landing site was a military base in a country called Korea. Yuna stepped off her ship into bright sunshine and warm air that smelled of grass and distant flowers. It was so different from the cool, controlled atmosphere of Valoran cities. A group of humans waited for her. They wore formal clothes and nervous expressions. At the front of the group stood a man in a simple dark suit. He was tall for a human, with broad shoulders and kind eyes. He walked toward her with a slight limp, leaning on a cane. "Welcome to Earth," he said. "I am Park Doyan. I will be your husband." Yuna studied him carefully. He was not handsome by Valoran standards. His skin did not glow. His mind was completely closed to her. But there was something in his eyes that surprised her. He was looking at her not with fear or disgust or pity, but with genuine curiosity. "You are not what I expected," she said. Do-hyun smiled. It changed his whole face, made it warmer somehow. "Neither are you." The wedding took place 1 week later. It was a small ceremony, nothing like the grand telepathic bonding rituals of Valoran royalty. There were no mind links, no sharing of memories, just words spoken out loud and rings exchanged. "Why do humans exchange rings?" Yuna asked before the ceremony. "It is a symbol," Diane explained. "A circle has no end. It means the promise we make today will last forever. But you cannot know the future. How can you promise forever?" Dahyun thought about this for a moment. "We cannot know. That is true. But we choose to believe anyway. That is what makes it meaningful." Yuna did not fully understand, but she found the idea beautiful in a strange way. During the ceremony, Dahyun placed a simple silver ring on her finger. His hands were rough from years of hard work, but his touch was gentle. "This ring means I choose you," he said. "Not because anyone told me to. Because I choose to try." Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. No one had ever chosen her before. After the ceremony, they traveled to Do-hyun's home. It was not a palace or government building. It was a small farmhouse in the countryside, surrounded by rice fields and mountains. Yuna had never seen anything like it. "This is where you live?" she asked. "This is where we live now," Dahyun said. "If you want to." The house was simple but comfortable. There were only a few rooms. The furniture was old but well cared for. Outside, chickens walked around the yard, and a dog came running to greet Do-hyun with a wagging tail. His name is Bomi, Tyne said, scratching the dog behind his ears. He is very friendly. He will like you. Yuna had never had a pet. The Lorans considered animals to be beneath them. But when Bomi came to sniff her hand, she found herself smiling. The first weeks were difficult. Yuna did not know how to cook or clean or take care of a house. She did not know how to talk to the neighbors who came to visit. She did not know how to live without servants and technology doing everything for her. But Do-yoon was patient. He taught her how to plant rice in the wet fields. He showed her how to make kimchi and other Korean foods. He never laughed at her mistakes. He never made her feel stupid for not knowing things. "Why are you so kind to me?" she asked one evening. "You know, I was sent here because my family did not want me." Do-hyun set down his cup of tea and looked at her seriously. "Do you know why I was chosen for this marriage?" "No, because I have no important family. No political connections. I was a soldier, but I was injured and could not fight anymore." He touched his leg where the old wound still bothered him. The government needed someone to marry an alien princess, but they did not want to risk anyone valuable. If this alliance failed, they wanted someone they could blame. Someone expendable. Yuna understood immediately. "You are like me." "Yes," Do-yoon nodded. "We are both people that our worlds threw away. But maybe that means we can understand each other. Maybe that means we can build something new together." That night, Yuna reached out and took his hand. Her weak telepathy stirred, and she felt his emotions wash over her. There was loneliness that matched her own. There was pain from old wounds that went deeper than his injured leg. But there was also warmth, acceptance, something that felt like the beginning of love. "I felt that," she whispered. "What did you feel?" "You actually care about me. You are not pretending." Do-hyun squeezed her hand gently. "Of course I care. You are my wife. But you do not even know me. Then let me know you." He smiled that warm smile again. "We have time. That is the good thing about being unimportant. No one is watching. We can figure this out at our own pace." Yuna thought about her mother's cold palace and her sister's cruel words. She thought about all the years she had spent feeling worthless and alone. Then she looked at this simple farmhouse with its old furniture and its friendly dog. She looked at this ordinary human man with his bad leg and his kind eyes. She realized that for the first time in her life, she felt like she might be home. "Teach me more about humans," she said. "I want to understand everything." "Everything?" Do-yoon laughed. "That will take a long time." "Good," Yuna said, and she meant it. "I hope it takes forever." 10 years passed like water flowing down a mountain stream. The small farmhouse grew to include extra rooms. The rice fields expanded, and Yuna's family grew in ways she had never imagined possible. Their first child was a daughter. They named Suri. She came into the world screaming loudly, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's faint violet glow. The doctors were amazed. No one knew what to expect from a human-Valoran hybrid. But Suri was healthy and strong and beautiful. 2 years later, twin boys arrived. They named them Jiwoo and Minho. The twins had slightly pointed ears like their mother, but in every other way, they seemed completely human. They were loud and energetic and constantly getting into trouble. Queen Hana sent exactly one message during all these years. It arrived on the day of Suri's birth. The message was short and cold. The bloodline dilutes. As expected. Do-hyun wanted to send an angry reply. Yuna stopped him. "She wants me to feel shame," Yuna explained calmly. "She wants me to regret having children with a human. I refuse to give her that satisfaction." Do-hyun held his newborn daughter in his arms and shook his head. How can anyone look at this child and see anything but a miracle? Yuna smiled and touched his face gently. Even after 10 years of marriage, She still felt wonder at the emotions she sensed through her: touch, love, pride, joy, protectiveness. The feelings humans carried inside them were so pure and powerful. As the years continued, something strange began to happen. Yuna's abilities started to change. On Valora, her weak telepathy had been useless. She could not control minds. She could not read thoughts. She could only sense emotions through physical contact, and even then, the feelings were faint and unclear. But living among humans had transformed her gift. Without the overwhelming telepathic noise of other Valorans, Yuna's sensitivity had grown stronger. She could now feel emotions more clearly than ever before. More importantly, she began to understand them in ways that no Valoran ever had. Valorans used their telepathy to dominate. They pushed their will into weaker minds. They commanded. They controlled. They saw other species as tools to be used. But Yuna had learned a different way from her human husband. She had learned to listen, to understand, to care. Her touch telepathy evolved into something entirely new: true empathy. She could feel not just surface emotions, but the deep currents beneath. She could sense old trauma hiding under anger. She could find hope buried under despair. She could understand people in ways that words could never capture. Word began to spread through the nearby town. There was an alien woman at the park farm who could help people feel better. Not through medicine, not through technology, just through her gentle touch and her patient listening. Veterans started coming to see her. Soldiers like Do-hyun, who had returned from war with wounds that did not show on the outside. Men and women who woke up screaming from nightmares. People who could not find peace in their own minds. Yuna helped them, one by one. She would sit with them, hold their hands, and feel their pain. She could not take the pain away, but she could understand it. She could help them feel less alone. And somehow, that made all the difference. The children were developing strange abilities too. Suri discovered her gift when she was 12 years old. She had been painting a picture of a sunset, and when she showed it to her parents, they both burst into tears. Not because it was sad, because looking at the painting made them feel exactly what Suri had felt while creating it. The peace, the beauty, the quiet joy of watching the day end. Suri could put emotions into her art. Anyone who looked at her paintings would feel what she wanted them to feel. It was not mind control. It was not telepathic domination. It was something gentler and more powerful. Emotional communication. The twins developed differently. Jiwoo and Minho had an almost magical understanding of machines and technology. They could look at a broken engine and somehow know exactly what was wrong. They could design solutions to problems that stumped professional engineers. Their minds worked in patterns that combined Valoran intuition with human creativity. By the time the children were 15, scientists from around the world were coming to study the Park family. The hybrid children were not weaker than pure Valorans or pure humans. They were something new, something that combined the best of both species. Queen Hannah heard about this, of course. Her spies kept her informed about everything happening on Earth, but she dismissed the reports. Emotional art? Technical intuition? These were not real powers. These were not useful abilities for war. She had no idea how wrong she was. Yuna watched her children grow with pride swelling in her heart. She thought about all the years she had spent believing she was worthless. She thought about her mother's cold words and her sister's cool laughter. They had been wrong about everything. Weakness was not the opposite of domination. It was something else entirely. It was the ability to connect, to understand, to love. And that, Yuna was beginning to realize, might be the greatest strength of all. One night, she sat with Do-hyun on their small porch, watching the stars appear one by one. The dog Bomi was old now, sleeping at their feet. Their children were inside doing homework and arguing about whose turn it was to wash dishes. "Thank you," Yuna said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me when no one else did. For helping me become who I was meant to be." Dahyun took her hand in his. His hair was starting to turn gray, and his limp had gotten worse with age. But his eyes were still kind. His heart was still warm. "You did that yourself," he said. "I just gave you a place to grow." Somewhere out in the darkness of space, the Kethrani horde was gathering strength. War was coming, and when it arrived, the galaxy would learn what humans and their Valoran princes had truly built together. But for now, in this quiet moment, there was only peace. The war began on a Tuesday morning. Yuna was making breakfast when the emergency broadcast appeared on every screen in the house. The Kethrani horde had broken through the Valoran Empire's outer defenses. 3 border planets had already fallen. Millions were dead. Dohyun came into the kitchen, his face pale. The children gathered around, watching the terrible images from distant star systems. Cities burning, ships exploding, the Valoran fleet retreating in chaos. "They finally did it," Dohyun said quietly. "The Kethrani found a way through." For centuries, the Valoran Empire had held back the Kethrani horde using their telepathic superiority. Valoran commanders could reach into Kethrani minds and create confusion. They could sense enemy plans before attacks happened. They could dominate weaker Kethrani soldiers and turn them against their own armies. But the Kethrani had evolved. They had developed neural shielding that blocked telepathic intrusion. For the first time in history, the Valorans could not simply think their way to victory, and they were losing badly. Queen Hana's 3 remaining daughters led the telepathic assault against the Kethrani commanders. They were the most powerful Valorans alive. They had trained their entire lives for war. Everyone expected them to turn the tide. They failed. Princess Myray was the first to fall. She tried to break through a Kethrani admiral's neural shield, and the feedback destroyed her mind. She died 3 days later without ever waking up. Princess Yuri survived longer, but her fleet was surrounded and destroyed near the Kelvin Nebula. Her final transmission was a scream of rage and fear. Princess Gina retreated to the capital world, broken and defeated. The sister who had once mocked Yuna for her weakness now sat in a dark room, refusing to speak to anyone. The empire was crumbling. Planet after planet fell to the horde. Queen Hana sent desperate messages to every ally she had ever made, begging for help, including Earth. The human response surprised everyone. For 20 years, the humans had been quietly watching and learning. They had studied Valoran technology. They had trained soldiers who understood alien warfare. They had built ships that combined human engineering with ideas borrowed from their Valoran princes, and they had not forgotten Yuna. Earth's military council contacted Dohyun first. They wanted his family to help lead the human response to the war. At first, Dohyun refused. His children were only 18 years old. They were not soldiers, but Suri came to her parents with determination in her eyes. "I know what my art can do," she said. "I can make people feel things. I can give them courage when they are afraid. I can give them hope when everything seems lost. Let me help." The twins agreed. They had spent years designing theoretical weapons and defense systems. Now those theories could become reality. Even Yuna herself had a role to play. Her understanding of emotions, both human and alien, could help bridge the gap between species who had never truly understood each other. The Park family went to war. The first battle they participated in was above a planet called Varith. The human fleet arrived just as the Kethrani were about to finish off the surviving Valoran defenders. It should have been a slaughter. The Kethrani outnumbered the combined forces 3-1. But something unexpected happened. Before the battle began, Suri made a broadcast. Not words, not commands, just a feeling. She projected the emotions she had practiced for years. Courage, unity, the fierce determination to protect what you love. The broadcast reached both fleets. Valoran soldiers who had been running away suddenly stopped. They remembered why they were fighting. They remembered their homes, their families, the things worth dying for. The Kathrani neural shields blocked telepathic attacks, but they were not designed to filter out genuine emotional resonance. They were designed to prevent domination, not inspiration. For the first time in their species' history, Kathrani warriors began to hesitate. They felt something they had never felt before: doubt. They began to question why they were fighting. What was the point of endless conquest? What were they really trying to achieve? The battle turned. Human ships, designed by Jiwo and Minho, tore through Kathrani formations. Human soldiers, immune to telepathic warfare, fought with disciplined precision. Valoran defenders, inspired by Suri's broadcasts, found new strength they did not know they had. The Kathrani fleet retreated for the first time in centuries. News of the victory spread across the galaxy. More battles followed. The pattern repeated again and again. Human creativity, Valoran telepathy, and something in between. The emotional bridge that Yuna's family had built. Yuna herself worked behind the front lines, helping wounded soldiers from all species. She sat with dying Valorans and helped them find peace. She comforted traumatized humans who had seen too much death. She even reached out to captured Kathrani, trying to understand the pain and fear that drove their endless war. What she found surprised her. The Kathrani were not evil. They were afraid. Thousands of years ago, they had nearly been wiped out by a more powerful species. They had survived by becoming conquerors themselves. Their entire civilization was built on the belief that they must dominate or be destroyed. They had never known anything else. Yuna began to wonder if victory was even the right goal. Destroying the Kathrani would just continue the cycle of violence. There had to be another way. She shared her thoughts with her husband late one night. Dayan, gray-haired and tired, but still strong, listened carefully. "You want to end the war without destroying them," he said. "I want to end the war in a way that means we never have to fight it again." Dayan smiled sadly. "That is a very human idea, finding peace with your enemies. Maybe that is why humans were the key all along," Yuna said. "Not because of your weapons or your technology. Because of how you think. Because you believe enemies can become friends." The war continued. But now there was hope for something more than just survival. There was hope for peace. The Peace Summit took place on a neutral space, stationed between the three powers: Valoran, human, Kathrani. For the first time in galactic history, all three species sat at the same table to talk instead of fight. Suri served as the emotional bridge. When words became angry, she helped everyone remember why they were there. When old hatreds threatened to destroy the negotiations, she reminded them of the cost of continued war. The twins designed communication technology that allowed the three very different species to understand each other. Kathrani language had sounds that humans could not hear and Valorans could not pronounce. But technology could translate not just words, but meanings. Yuna advised on understanding. She had spent months talking to Kathrani prisoners, learning their fears and hopes. She helped the negotiators see past the monstrous reputation to the frightened civilization beneath. Dahyun was there too, standing beside his wife as an equal. The human governments had wanted to send important diplomats and famous generals. Instead, they sent a retired farmer with a bad leg and a gentle heart. Because Dahyun understood something that politicians often forgot. Peace is not made between nations. It is made between people. The negotiations lasted 3 months. There were moments when everything nearly fell apart. Ancient grudges, fresh wounds, generations of hatred died, but in the end, they reached an agreement. The Kethrani would stop their conquest. In exchange, they would be given territory where they could live without fear. The Valoran Empire would share resources instead of hoarding them. Humanity would serve as mediators, the neutral voice that both sides could trust. It was not a perfect peace. There would be problems for generations to come. But it was a beginning. After the treaty was signed, Queen Hannah requested a private meeting with Yuna. It was the first time they had spoken face-to-face in over 20 years. The queen looked older then. Yuna remembered. Her glow had faded. Her shoulders, once straight and proud, now curved with the weight of loss. She had buried 2 daughters. She had watched her empire shrink. She had seen everything she believed in proven wrong. Yuna waited for her mother to speak. "I watched the broadcasts," Queen Hannah finally said. "Your daughter's emotional projections. I saw what they did to our soldiers, to the Kethrani. I did not believe it at first. I thought it was some kind of trick. It was no trick. No." The queen's voice was heavy. It was real. It was something we Valorans have never been able to do. We can dominate. We can control. But we cannot inspire. She paused. "You made that possible. You and your human husband and your hybrid children." Yuna said nothing. She had waited a long time to hear these words. But now that they were coming, she felt no satisfaction. Only sadness. "I gave you away because I thought you were worthless," Queen Hannah continued. "I sent you to a primitive species on a backwater planet because I wanted to forget you existed. I told myself it was for the good of the Empire. But the truth is..." She stopped, struggling with words that Valorans rarely spoke. "The truth is I was ashamed of you. And that shame was my failure, not yours." The queen looked at her youngest daughter with eyes full of pain. "You saved us, Yuna. You and your family saved the entire empire. If you had not been on Earth, if you had not had those children, if you had not learned what you learned from the humans, we would all be dead now. Or worse, we would still be fighting a war we could never win." Yuna finally spoke. "What do you want, Mother?" "I want to understand." Queen Hannah's voice cracked. "I want to know how I was so wrong. I want to know how my weakest daughter became my strongest." Yuna considered the question for a long moment. Outside the window, stars burned in the endless darkness. Somewhere out there, 3 civilizations were beginning to build something new together. "You were not wrong about me being different," Yuna said slowly. "I was different. I am different. But you made a mistake that our people have been making for thousands of years. You thought that power means control. You thought that strength means domination. You measured everyone by how much force they could project into the world." She stepped closer to her mother. "Dohin taught me a different way. Humans are weak by Valoran standards. They cannot read minds. They live such short lives. But they have survived and grown because they learned to connect with each other. They learned that working together makes everyone stronger. They learned that understanding your enemy is better than destroying them." Yuna reached out and took her mother's hand. For the first time ever, she felt Queen Hannah's emotions directly. Grief and regret and shame, and underneath it all, buried so deep that Hannah herself probably did not know it was there, love. Damaged, twisted love that had never known how to express itself. But love nonetheless. "My weakness forced me to find a different kind of strength," Yuna said. "If I had been born powerful like my sisters, I would have become just like them. Just like you. I would have dominated and controlled and never understood. But I could not do those things. So I had to learn to listen, to feel, to care." She squeezed her mother's hand gently. "That is the answer you are looking for, Mother. Real strength is not about what you can take from others. It is about what you can give. It is about what you choose to protect. Queen Hannah was crying now, tears running down her face like she had never cried before. The Laurens did not cry. They considered it a sign of weakness. But Una had learned that tears were sometimes the strongest thing a person could show. "I am sorry," the queen whispered. "I am so sorry, Una. I know. Can you ever forgive me?" Una thought about all the years of loneliness and pain. She thought about being sent away like unwanted goods. She thought about never receiving a kind word from her own mother. Then she thought about Do-yun and their children and the life they had built together. She thought about how her suffering had led her to exactly where she needed to be. "Come to Earth," she said. "Meet your grandchildren. Share a meal with us. Learn our names. That is not forgiveness." "No," Una agreed. "But it is a beginning. And beginnings are where everything important starts." 1 month later, Queen Hannah arrived at a small farmhouse in the Korean countryside. She met Sori and the twins. She ate human food and learned to use chopsticks. She played with the family dog. Now so old he could barely walk, she sat on the porch with her daughter and watched the sunset over the rice fields. She began to understand what real power looked like. It looked like a kitchen filled with laughter. It looked like choosing love over dominance. It looked like humanity. And slowly, carefully, one day at a time, she began to change.